I have the pleasure of introducing Josette tonight. In my own ongoing study of holistic education, I'm Cheryl, by the way, Cheryl Morris. In my own ongoing study of holistic education, I came across podcasts called Meetings with Remarkable Educators. These are 35 podcasts with transcripts with holistic educators hosted by Luvmour and his partner and wife, Josette, who is our guest today. From January 2018 through May 2019, these podcasts are rich in content, and I continue to be drawn in. Names of podcast guests, which will be familiar here, are Paul Friedman, Phil Gang, Four Arrows, Renee Owens. And some names we've heard referenced during our discussions here: William Green, Ron Miller, and you all probably know others when you take a look. Another time when I met up with Ba and Josette online was when we each participated in a 7-week class through Transformative Learning Foundation, TLF. The online class was called Indigenous Wisdom, guided by Jennifer Engrazio. Time permitting, I hope Josette will speak more about TFL and learning opportunities there. Josette specializes in the fields of human development, adult transformational learning, sustainable family relationships, relationship-based education, consciousness studies, and how adult and child grow together. In addition to her consulting practice at Luvmour Consulting, Josette has authored numerous journal articles, 5 ebooks and book chapters, as well as co-authored 6 print books with a focus on building relationships with children that promote optimal well-being. Josette teaches graduate courses at Antioch University in the Individualized Master of Arts program and has been educating adults since 1992. Her work pioneers how adult and child grow together. Josette Luvmour is honored that her book, Grow Together, Parenting as a Path to Well-Being, Wisdom, and Joy, has earned the prestigious Mom's Choice Award. And it's with pleasure I turn it over to Josette. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. That was really honoring introduction. I just want to say a bit about Transformative Learning Foundation, since that's where we connected. That is an organization, educational organization with a focus on transformational learning. And they have, I'd like to just give, matter of fact, maybe I can put it in the chat, their website where you can look up, anybody can look up courses. One of the main things that they like to do is say that you don't have to be in a program or in a graduate school courses or anything like that. Anybody, any age, no matter who's interested in transformational learning can take courses from them. And I teach with them. I also teach at Antioch, as you said. And I just realized I don't have their website, so I'm going to get it for you and put it in the chat. Anyway, it's the Transformational Learning Foundation if you want to take a look look it up yourself. So today, what I'd like to talk about, which is something that's near and dear to my heart. Oh, I think I did. Is first of all, how children grow and learn, and how we as parents, as educators, as anyone who is in relationship with children in our lives benefits from the relationship, as well as we're not just raising children, but we're growing simultaneously. And I'd like to kind of spell that out a little bit and then open it up for discussion, because everybody in some form or another, whether we're aunts, uncles, we have children in our lives, and all children go through life stages as they grow, and Every life stage has natural capacities within that stage, but we know now that development occurs in relationship. So as stages unfold, it's not just a formula. We're not just unfolding exactly the same as all other humans, but we in fact are developing in relationship to the environment in which we grow, to the people around us, to the kind of nurturing we receive. Education and the environments around education are nurturing children and nurturing these innate capacities. So we're born with natural capacities within us, but how we receive nurturing from the context around us depends on how or influences how those natural capacities unfold. I'm going to talk about some basic principles here before I get going. There's an organizing principle in every age of development, and that is, I would define it as an immaterial essence or an animating principle. We could call it an actuating agent of an individual life. The expression of the organizing principle changes from age and developmental stage to developmental stage. It doesn't stay the same throughout. And that organizing principle is innate. We're born with it. But as I said earlier, the environment that we are within brings forward or allows for the emergence of that organizing principle to come forth. Well-being, we might say, is not often well defined in the field of psychology or human development, and perhaps not even in education, is a dynamically balanced state of health, which optimizes our opportunity to actualize our full selves, to access our full nature. So people who possess well-being might also find themselves feeling adaptive in our lives, able to be resilient with shifts and changes that occur, might be able to access satisfaction in life, might be able to actualize a sense of personal meaning in our lives. And I'll go into that further because each and every age of development has available to it access to well-being that's specific to the organizing principle of that age. How's everybody hanging with me so far? A lot of words going on. Still good? Okay, good. Now here's a tricky part. In every age of growth, there is a field of knowing. All life forms go through developmental changes, we know that. And the field of knowing is a region in the child's consciousness in which they access specific capacities and capabilities. And each field of knowing has specific needs. We, as the adults, the aunts, the uncles, the teachers, the parents in the child's life, our job is to be in relationship with what is developing in the children around us and to supply each of those, potentially supply those developmental needs. So I thought I would go through it a little bit in some detail and go through, in our particular approach, we've broken it down into 4 broad developmental stages. And to not put too fine a point on it, I'll go through the broad brushstrokes and talk about what developmental needs we have the opportunity to provide, how to create environments that nurture those developmental needs and the organizing principle that's available in that particular age group. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about the adult, what happens to us as we're in relationship with the child, perceiving their developmental needs and then providing those developmental needs. Does that sound like a good plan? And then I'd like to open it up for discussion. So I'm going to lay out a little bit of information first. And I think I'd like to use a visual. I don't know if I can share screen. Am I allowed to share screen? Yeah, okay, great. What I'd like to do is use a visual to make it easy for everybody to follow along and I will make this information into a PDF and make it available to you, Cheryl, and you can disseminate it out to everybody. So Those of you who like to take notes, you can relax, or you can go ahead and take notes, whatever you prefer. And but this information will be available to you at the end of this talk. So, as I said, there's an organizing principle in every age of development in the child's field of knowing. The right nourishments at the right time in the right way actualize that organizing principle. Every age child is capable of communication, of course, but key thing is we as adults, it's incumbent upon us to communicate with children in such a way that the child can receive what we're trying to communicate. And so often we as adults or teachers, I see quite frequently, communicate in the ways that we believe a child should be able to understand, but it's not necessarily what they're really capable of, the way they're capable of receiving information, because we're entering their field of knowing, and it's incumbent upon us to communicate in such a way that they can receive. And so these relationships that I'm going to suggest shape the developing brain. And we know from the brain sciences that the brain develops from bottom up, brain stem first, then the midbrain, then the prefrontal lobes. We know that each brain aspect of brain development becomes dominant throughout the developmental years, that through the age of 23, our brains are continuing to develop and grow in relationship to the world around us. And we also know that our brains never stop till the day we die, and who knows what happens after that. But we're always developing in relationship to the world around us. So I'll share my screen now. And some of you who have listened to these conversations before know exactly what I'm going to say. But I'm looking forward to conversation. Let's see now. I can get this to be larger. Okay. Is that large enough for everybody to see? Great, fantastic. So I'm going to go through, as I said, broad brushstrokes. Early childhood from 0 to 7, which is brainstem governed. Feeling development, midbrain development from 8 to 12. Teen development, prefrontal lobe development 13 to 17, and the development of true reason 18 to 23, which is an integration of right left hemispheres and things like that that happen. The primary organizing principle for early childhood brainstem development is a sense of a rightful place, where the child feels a sense of belonging, a sense of being in the right place, being around people who are supplying a sense of acceptance, loving touch, security, warmth, and are able to sensorially explore their whole world with their whole body in a very safe environment. That's what they need to thrive. And secondarily, what's organizing is a sense of relationship to personal boundaries. And when children feel a healthy relationship to personal boundaries, that sense of personal strength is able to develop in a good way and they really come forward. Again, these are broad brushstrokes for the sake of conversation, of just laying out a foundation, and then I'm willing to go deeper depending in relationship to whatever questions you might ask, but this is just to lay a foundation. Ages 8 through 12, primarily midbrain development, the organization of trust in others, trust of self, learning in relationship how to reciprocate with trustworthy people by cooperating. This age is often a time when people will come and say, the child is not cooperating in the classroom, the child is not cooperating at home. And of course, you can't take a child out of an environment and say the child is separate from the environment, but we have to say, what is the child surrounded with, what is happening in the environment, that cooperation is not emerging. because there is an organizing principle that is available during this age, and it leads always back to trust. Primarily, the child is looking for feeling mentors, people who are honest and fair and discuss their feelings openly and freely, and are willing to be in relationship with the child's sense of fairness. And that's key there, because quite often adults impose our sense of fairness on children. And in fact, it's the child's sense of fairness that we need to be relating to. I just had a situation with a mom just this morning who was telling me about her son is blossoming into this age of development, and his feelings are really coming forth, and he wants to explore those feelings with her. And they were visiting her sister's house and there were kids were all in the pool, and these were cousins, and one set of cousins was bullying, the older boys were bullying the younger boy, which was her son. And he said to his mom, "I want you to go tell their mom that they're bullying me." And she said, "Well, I'm not going to, because I'm afraid that she's going to spank them, and I really don't approve of that parenting method, so I don't really want to tell them, their mom, what the kids are doing," which he thought was terribly unfair. This to him was like a violation of his feelings. And later on, she figured that out, and she went back and she apologized to him. And she said he just blossomed, knowing that she recognized her mistake, and she went back to him and said, "I do recognize why I should have spoken about your feelings to their mom, and I will next time." That made all the difference in the world to him. So this organization of feelings happens primarily 8 through 12. It is a midbrain development that occurs there, feeding back into all other centers of the brain. Teen development, 13 through 17 primarily, is the organization of autonomy and learning how to self-govern in a healthy way. And teenagers love to do this with other teenagers. I could say more about that. Teens love to be in tribes with teenagers. As a matter of fact, my granddaughter, who is the older granddaughter, is 17 years old. Right now, she's on a trip in Africa with teen groups, digging wells for communities there, and engaging with other teenagers in a tribal type situation where they're meaningfully doing construction with the communities there. And that just has so much meaning to her, simply because it's a contribution, it's bonding with other teenagers, it's a sense of self-governing in a healthy way. And through activities like this, teenagers can construct their own identities, which is their job to do, which creates a sense of personal power with a healthy relationship to freedom. The primary organizing nourishment that helps teens organize this autonomy, sense of identity, is sensitive respect to the teens' explorations, identity explorations, which will take many forays into music, dance forms, outfits and clothing, what their peers are doing. Many explorations occur through these teen years. And the locus of learning primarily is an exploration of ideals, wider social interactions, and they're looking always to explore new identities, finding their own core nature, exploring identities to discover really who they are in themselves. So they may try on many identities and end up tossing some of them out because they don't match their own true core nature. So teenagers are always exploring into their ideals to uncover and discover their core nature and their core identity. Childhood lasting through the ages of 18 to 23, the development of true reason. The primary organizing principle during these years is a sense of interconnection with all life, a more global perspective. From that global perspective comes the ability to laugh at ourselves with a sense of humility. humor, and humility. Secondarily, what's organizing is the ability to act with intentionality, to be able to see incisively into the nature of situations and people, to be able to form a committed relationship that will last through time. And what is needed during these developmental years is the ability of the adults and primary caregivers around them to recognize them as mature people with an ability to commit, with a more, they're no longer children, so they want to be seen as having equality with adults. They want to be recognized for the achievements that they've accomplished so far, and to be seen as able to have internal recognition of their own internal states. And this recognition of these abilities, their maturity, their commitment, their equality, their achievement, and their ability to recognize their own internal states, is the food that allows them to access these organizing principles higher up. The locus of control for a child's learning is dialogue. Children this age love dialogue to cut into meaning. They don't necessarily want us to impart our sense of meaning onto them. What they're really looking for is a dialogue back and forth, is an engagement with us to help them uncover their own sense of meaning, their own explorations of their organization of the world. Now, as I said earlier, this is a very, very broad, there's a lot more depth that is available in understanding these things. But I do want to spend a little time in discussing, well, first of all, let me open it up to comments or questions, because I realize I laid a lot of information out there, and I'm sure there might be some unclarities that folks would like to talk about. Anyone?
I always have questions.
Robert.
I'm curious because I studied this over 20 years ago when you used to call it natural learning rhythms.
Mm-hmm.
And the body being, feeling being, ideal being, reason being still sticks in my brain because it always made sense to me, that emphasis on the being and so the stages of development. But so I'm curious, the changes that you've had over the years from the shift from, I think you call it natural learning relationships now instead of rhythms.
That's right.
And you've taken the being out of the stage names. And I'm just curious about how that transition happened.
Well, first, relationship rhythms to relationships. Natural learning rhythms implies development has a trajectory in one direction, and actually it doesn't. Development is cyclical. It is not linear. We progress out, and then we come back and we do regressions, and then we progress out even further and come back and do regressions. But all of that depends upon the relationships in our environment, hence the change of rhythms to relationships. The developmental stages are still called being, and sometimes I modify that to my audience to not use a nomenclature that people find it difficult to receive. So I eliminate some of the difficult nomenclature. So early childhood, ages 0 to 7, body, being. The body is organizing on the planet primarily in relationship to the nurturing provided in the environment. And the body is learning metabolism, it is learning boundaries, it is learning how to be in relationship with others in a body being sensing way. It's exploring sensorially their environment in safe environments. Feeling being, ages 8 through 12, is the organization of midbrain feeling development, relationships with others. I and other is the primary realization there, where I'm not in this world all by myself. And this body does, in fact, die. And in that death, there is an opportunity for this very profound relationships, and I want to figure out how to do that. So the suffix in all of the 4 developmental stages is being, because being means nothing essential is missing. And in this organization of feeling development, the child is whole and worthwhile as they are in this age of development, and in the body being, in the body organization of development. In teen development, we call that age in our nomenclature ideal being. It's the age of projecting ideals onto the world and then receiving back the information that the world, how the world receives that and engages with us in this projection of ideals onto the world. The again, being means nothing essential is missing. Teenagers are, I call them social change agents in many ways, because they challenge status quo. And they want relationship, they want it refreshed, they want it new, they don't want pablum answers, they don't want platitudes, they want real authenticity from us. And that oftentimes challenges adults to question their own status quo. And then the 4th developmental stage in broad strokes would be reasonable being, or the development of or engagement of true reason. So we do still have that nomenclature, but I don't often use it because I find people find it confusing. Thank you. Yeah, Paul.
Sorry, I'm muted. I also had a question that connects to my long history knowing you and your work in this way. So when I was first reading your and Ba's work, and then when I met you, I had 2 children who were at that stage of body being and feeling being.
Been a long time.
It's been a long time, and so they grew up, and now, and I wouldn't have asked this question till fairly recently, I now have a 23-year-old and 26-year-old,
Wow.
and I'm wondering about their stage of development. And I'm also wondering, you know, I don't know, tapping into your personal insight as well as your research in terms of the uniqueness, or is there, do you find there's unique developmental opportunities for the adult in the role of skip generation, so grandparenting, as I know you're doing very intimately with your grandkids? I'm just now, because I know this is recorded, just like in case my kids get a hold of this, there's nothing happening. No pressure and no grandkids needed or expected, but I'm just curious about that unique role, and you know, and kind of what I sense is that we've lost the centrality of grandparenting in our family structures to a large extent. And I wonder about the implications for that.
That's a great question. I love that question. Yes, I am co-raising my grandchildren because of my daughter's death due to cancer. And I live with their dad and my husband, so me and 2 guys. I say that very advisedly. And their Celeste is 14. They just turned 14 this June. And Ruby is 17. And as I just said, she's on a teen trip, but should be back within a few days. And it is a major engagement. Don't ever underestimate what it takes to raise kids. It is a major engagement. It's not smooth sailing. I'm not, this is my field, and I am still quite challenged quite often by, you know, middle school challenging, challenging status quo. I mean, our dinner table discussions, the one time we get together every day is a dinner, and our dinner table discussions can go from politics to human rights to pronouns to you name it, we run the gamut. And I am growing and learning all the time with them. So don't ever think that there's not an opportunity to grow with kids in new and different ways all the time. Someday I'll retire, but I don't know when the hell that's going to be. And in terms of stages of development as we grow into past the age of 23, absolutely. We're changing, shifting, and growing in relationship with our environment, in relationship with our the people around us, in relationship to our willingness to self-question, in relationship to our willingness to self-observe and reflect and self-inquire. As we all know, there are people in our lives who are not willing to self-question, not willing to engage inquiry, and are steadfastly going to defend whatever niche they've created for themselves. And that becomes very difficult, especially when raising teenagers. I can tell you that. There's no way you can keep going and just hold tight to an identity and never have it be challenged. So to be in authentic relationship with children stimulates reflection. And in providing these developmental nourishments with children, it stimulates us as whatever age we are, whether we're parents, grandparents, teachers, or aunts and uncles, to reflect on some of the belief systems that we carry forward and what's the stories we create around our belief systems, and willing to question those stories, willing to, how do our stories interfere with our ability to be fully present with the child in front of me, with the human being in front of me, in our relationships with children of any age. So my study is how nurturing and continuing to nurture children throughout our adult years brings us to opportunities to self-inquire, self-question, and self-reflect on our own lives, our own belief systems, our own attitudes, our behaviors, our values, all are up for renovation constantly, which is great. I mean, why should we just glom onto one thing and say, this is for sure the way the world works. This is for sure the way it is. And, it sooner or later that gets blown apart. But in terms of adult development and the field of adult development, developing with children is not the only way to develop, surely, certainly. It's just that's my field of study, is with children. But there's spiritual development, there's human development of all sorts and kinds throughout our adult years. Almost all of them, from my studies, though, do require the adult to self-question, self-observe, reflect on the observation, and to self-inquire. I know no possibility for movement and growth without us willing to question our steadfast, strong belief systems. So in terms of 26 or 23 and 26, yes, they're forging into beyond childhood development, but the brain is still reorganizing constantly. We know that there's myelination that's occurring. There's brain washes, chemical washes that occur throughout the brain to wash out neural networks that are no longer being used, to create stronger connections for pathways that are being used. And that's happening throughout our entire lives. We know that now. So in human development, we have the opportunity to change and grow throughout our lives, but we have more volition in engaging that growth and development as we grow older. But is that, yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. That's a great question. Anyone else before I forge on to the next topic? Okay, I'm going to call that good. I'm going to share my screen again and talk a little bit about the potential in adult development. And this comes from with children, by the way, the potential, and I'll finish that sentence before I start another one. Something my brain does quite often. We have this potential with the children in front of us where the needs of the child are not necessarily needs that were satisfied in us as we were grown. And quite often, unfortunately, many adults adapt to the idea that if we grew up without it, then the children will be just fine without it. They don't necessarily, they'll adapt, they'll change, they'll grow, because I certainly turned out fine, and so they're going to be just fine. When in fact we know it's quite possible, but it would be so much better if children received their developmental needs, their imperatives that they're called in certain fields of human development. And they called imperatives because they are imperative. This is what is needed by the human system to access these innate capacities in the best way possible. So, but as we're called upon to supply something that we didn't necessarily receive when we were growing, we're challenged. We're challenged to come up with the resources within ourselves to pause and not impose our reality and make our reality their reality, but instead to draw upon deeper resources within ourselves to find what this child needs, what does this child really need, and supply that need. And in so doing, quite often adults find that they're nurturing themselves simultaneously, that in giving this child something I never received in my life, that I'm bathed in that same right, to quote one of my participants. I'm bathed in the right to receive that myself. And I am, sometimes parents will tell me that they're brought to tears for realizing that they have the right to want that from the world and to give that to themselves while they're giving it to their children. And as adults do that, the potential for their own growth and development changes and grows. And I'll show you a little bit about what I discovered and continue to discover when people reveal to me some of the things that they find. So I will share my screen once again. And that should be pretty clear to everybody now. I'll make it full screen. How's that? Does everybody can see that? So let's start over here on the left-hand column. As we nurture, there it is, Robin, body being child. As we nurture the child ages 0 to 7, we are supplying a sense of, we're supplying, remember, the organizing principle is a sense of belonging, a sense of rightful place in the world. The adult has the opportunity, as we create these environments for children, to develop a greater sense of rightful place within ourselves, a greater sense of courage and personal strength. And sometimes, like when teachers who are, let's say, kindergarten, first grade, second grade teachers, this age group, continue to create classroom environments that are developing, nurturing this age of development again and again and again, we can develop further as adults to access a sense of service and compassionate action and to the ability to act for the benefit of others. Many people have told me that's what they find themselves accessing over and over again as they nurture and care for the early childhood years, ages 0 to 7. Adults who are nurturing feeling being children, and for teachers that would be age grades 4 and 5, 3 and 4, 4 and 5, ages 9 through 12. Adults will often develop a deeper sense of trust in themselves, the ability to be empathic and feel into the feelings of others. This comes with organizing environments that are trustworthy for children this age. The ability to feel feelings and emotions with greater complexity, affective complexity. Those who have the opportunity, such as myself, who are grandparents raising children, or teachers who are creating classrooms for this age child over and over again, have opportunities to organize and reorganize feelings of greater connection to others. People have told me about a sense of greater connection to humanity, a greater connection to their friends, a greater connection to the people around them, a deeper sense of love. And some people have even talked about developing a sense of devotion and compassion. Compassion, not in the sense of taking over another person's suffering, but rather the ability to walk alongside others in their suffering and be a companion. These are the potentials in feeling development for adults who nurture children ages 9 through 12. Teenage years, nurturing the ideal being teenagers, ages 13 through 17. As we nurture this age child, we have the opportunity to organize, reorganize, and reorganize again a more autonomous self, a more authentic self with greater and greater social ability. If we have the great opportunity to grandparent our teenagers, or to teach teenagers many years in a row, or to be in relationship with teenagers many years in a row, we can reorganize a sense of personal resilience, the ability to bounce back in the face of adversity, integrate all former senses of self into a wholeness of self, to integrate identity after identity after identity, to call upon identities in relationship to circumstance and not be stuck to any one identity, an integrated whole self, to be open-minded and to be able to act with insight. These are the qualities of adult development that people have talked about when having the opportunity to nurture teenagers, ages 13 through 17. And then reasonable being individual. The adult who has the opportunity. Now, by this time, many kids are off in college, but even off in college, they do come home. They do come back. They do, we do have opportunities to continue to nurture and support them. We have the opportunity to reorganize our values in life. These are the values that are more substantive, and maybe even some call them timeless. We grow in self-knowledge, and we can reorganize and organize again a sense of purpose and meaning in life that, well, I'll just say a sense of purpose and meaning in life. Given the opportunity to interact and continue to nurture this particular age child, we have the opportunity to grow in wisdom, to be fully present with the people in our lives. And people have told me a sense of gratitude really came forward. Now, all of these things down here in this lower segment, below the second set of arrows, are aspects of wisdom in the literature, and that have been expressed by participants who, in studies that I have done and participated in, where people have had the opportunity to nurture and care for children throughout each of these developmental stages. These capacities, human capacities, are available to us as we grow in many different ways. Nurturing children isn't the only way to access wisdom, but these wisdom qualities have been documented as coming forward in people, adults who nurture children throughout their adult years. And in the lower part of this chart, I define some of these terms, which again, I will make available to Cheryl and she can get them to you. So in my work, I went ahead and created a spiral of adult development with children. So before I open this up to discussion, I would like to go through this spiral and talk a little bit about how this works. Oftentimes, families will come to a program that we were doing, or my consulting practice, or to seek family help because something's off in the family. And quite often, when something's off in a family, it's the child that's identified as the problem. Very rarely will the adults come to me and say, something's off in my family and I'm the problem and I know it. But more often than not, it's the child that's identified as the problem. And so it begins with somebody willing to come forward and say, something's off in my family or something's off in my classroom. And I want to figure out how to put this back on track. For example, I'll give you just a quick example in the classroom. In a 4th, 5th grade classroom, it's a 4th, 5th combined classroom. Several children, the children had bonded in the beginning of the years, as teachers will often be able to help children bond. But several children, due to family situations, had to leave the class, had to leave the school. And the children who were left in the classroom were strongly impacted by the loss of that group of children who had to leave because their families moved away. And so the teacher came and said, how can I rebond this classroom of feeling being children? I know their feeling development is going on here, but I don't know how to get them back on track. So we worked with a series of feeling or relational exercises, games, activities, values clarifications, things like that in the classroom to help bring it back together. So it starts with somebody, some adult in the system acting and saying something's off. That requires a sense of personal agency to act, but then to use personal agency to reflect on the child. And in doing these exercises or activities or nurturing of children, to reflect on our own childhood, where we did get nourished, where we didn't get nourished, where we might be able to supply for ourselves things that we didn't get when we were children. Or in the process of engaging with children in our lives, we have that opportunity to nurture ourselves. That inevitably leads to emotional adult development. And emotional development, we know this in the field of adult development, is interlocked with cognitive development. Emotional development such as trust, empathy, affective complexity interacts and engages and activates cognitive development. And cognitive development and emotional development interplay with each other constantly in the field of adult development. So cognitive development would be changes in perspective, differentiation from former ways of knowing, former ways of being, making new meaning of my world, making new meaning of myself, my identities, my creativity, and which leads to greater emotional development, which leads to greater cognitive development. Continuing on in that vein, if we have the opportunity to continue to act intentionally to nurture children's developmental needs and engage self-inquiry, self-observation, self-reflection, and self-inquiry, we have the opportunity to access well-being. And adults would talk about a sense of increased personal agency, a sense of health and well-being, a sense of inner strength. And if from that well-being, many adults find the ability to sustain their intentional efforts with children and to have the opportunity to emerge into accessing these wisdom aspects that I spoke about in this earlier development, in this earlier chart, and to launch into future development, which I won't go into here. So That is quite a lot. I'm going to stop screen sharing here and open up the conversation to wherever you would like to take it from this point forward. Comments, questions, if anyone wants to discuss this idea of self-observation, self-reflection, self-inquiry as the I would call it the pivot point of adult development in the process of engaging, developing as adults. Anything you'd like to contribute or discuss.
Thank you, Josette. I really appreciate it. Got the wheels churning, that's for sure. One question I had was just around what you think is the result or the consequence of communities that don't have this kind of learning relationship. You know, what are some of the shortcomings that are created in that?
You probably know the answer to this question. You've probably seen communities where children are imposed upon to conform to adult expectations, or classrooms where children are punished rather than related to. Or that mother I just told you about earlier who didn't want to tell her sister what her kids were doing because she knew her sister was going to spank her kids. And, you know, so what happens when children get beat, you know, when corporal punishment is what's used as a teaching method, is children shut down. We know that, you know, from the trauma studies and the trauma research, that it is wise for a human being to go into self-protection and to preserve those inner abilities when the world is betraying or traumatizing their senses. So human beings that are in self-protection don't have the energy or the wherewithal to move out and explore what and access what the nurturing that they need, but they are in self-protective mode, which is where their energy has to be used in order to survive. So we know from all the trauma work what is involved in re-accessing and emerging into health and well-being. So our world is, I think, unfortunately, full of examples of communities like that. Yeah, thank you for asking. It's a good question, though. But, you know, oftentimes I've seen somebody in the community will go, I know this is not right. I know there's something better. That there's an opportunity for something better. So, you know, I've hope springs eternal in me that somebody somewhere will step out of the norm and challenge themselves.
I would like to ask a question. When you have parents that ask you how to help children resolve their difficulties with each other, I myself have tried to use nonviolent communication with my grandchildren, and I'm with some success. But I wondered what Josette does, or what Josette says.
Well, it's trial and error. I mean, I'm no expert, honestly. Because every child is a different set of circumstances with a different set of background histories, with a different set of biographical stories. And so the first thing I have to do is relate to who they are. If I come in with my standards, I'm dead in the water. Not to say I don't have them, but I have to keep them at bay or keep them in check. Nonviolent communication, I love it. And yet it is a technique that we as adults can adapt and learn. Children won't necessarily pick up our I statements versus you statements right away. And that would take a long teaching. So the first thing I would have to do is relate to who they are and what's happening here. I have to get the story. They've got a story about what's going on. I've got to receive that story. And I've got to inquire about each of the children's sense of fairness. You know, obviously they have different senses of fairness, otherwise there wouldn't be an argument. Because if we agreed, no argument. So I've got to find out what their senses of fairness is. And then I've got to, as any diplomat would, get them listening to each other and try to as I'm inviting them to speak to me, I'm also supposing that the other one is listening and hears that. And I might then inquire back and forth, what do you think about what she just said? And what does that mean to you? And I mean, very, very relational in the process of helping them uncover, is there any common ground here? Is there any commonality where we can come together? But you got to let them get their stories out first, because that's what they're full of. They're full with their stories, whatever their story is. And that's got to come out, and it's and not be opposed. It's got to come out and be received. And in that, and then they can be open to hearing what the other person might have their gripe about. And then you can start asking, so what do you think the solution is to this? I hear this side of the story, I hear that side of the story. You've each heard each other now. What do you think we should do? And hopefully one or the other will come up with some solution. If not, then I can offer, well, I'm wondering if we can try this out. What do you think about that? And I'm always throwing it back on them, because really what I want to evoke in that age child is their own sense of fairness and learning how to come to a meeting with another human being who disagrees with them. How are we going to do that? Be a great thing to learn at that age, wouldn't it? So it's a give and take. It's a back and forth. I've got to really be relational to who they are and inquire and see if in that process they can come, something can emerge out of it. They first of all, they've created the problem. So I'm hoping that if we air it out enough, the response can come out of the problem, and they can come to it. Best case scenario, mind you. Not to say that, you know, we as adults, I mean, I might be able to see the solution right off the bat. But imagine if I come in and just lay that out, they're not ready yet. They've got to be heard. Good question, though. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Annie. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, it was just you as well. Yeah, I was just wondering, you've mentioned story a couple of times. Even you mentioned it earlier, how people get stuck in their story later on, that kind of thing, and how that leaves us, you know, in a space where we can't adapt, can't learn in some sense, you know, just stuck. And so just as listening to what you were just sharing about, you know, two children in conflict and they each have a story that they're bringing. Seems like I'm just exploring this, like, you know, I appreciate what you're saying about each child needs to speak their story and have it received, have it heard by the other. And then would you say that the dynamic really kind of boils down to in finding a solution in changing the common, you know, the shared story, or putting a shared story together that's like, oh, okay, so when I did this, now I just heard you say, here was your experience. Yeah, I'd just like you to talk about story a bit, because I think story is really crucial to the way that we grow and develop, you know, especially stage 2 forward. Yeah.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Create a shared story. In you know, when in studying a while back, I wanted to bring restorative justice principles and engagement into the school that I was working in. And I found, so as I did some studying of restorative approaches to problem solving. and restorative approaches to discipline versus punishment. And found that in that approach, in the restorative approach, I just in a nutshell, I mean, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but in a nutshell, you've got the person who feels offended, you've got the person who committed whatever offense was done, then you've got witnesses to the, and everybody has a story, and that all those stories have to come out. So you start with the witnesses first because they're the least impacted, you might say. And so the witness has to, and each of the witnesses has an opportunity to tell the story of what they saw. And then the person who was the offender or offendee, either way, speaks what they experienced, and the offender speaks what they experienced. And in so doing, they hear each other's stories. Well, I'll tell you a story about something that happened in our school. The kids were being taught wrestling, and in their play, the way you do this particular wrestling, according to this teacher, is when you're down and you're pinned, if you hit the mat 3 times, that means you're supposed to be released. Like you're admitting that you're down and you're supposed to be released. Well, this child was pinned down by one of the in this case, the offender. He hit the mat 3 times. The offender didn't let him up. It was a girl on top, boy on bottom. And so he hit the mat 3 times again, and she didn't let him up. Well, in our restorative approach, we had them, in this room together, and we were, all listening to the stories. It came out that the girl that was on top is often on bottom by her sister, who is mean to her. And it felt so good to her to be on top for the first time ever that she didn't want to let it go. And the kid that was on the bottom, the offendee, the person who was, had been violated against, heard her story. He said, "Oh, I didn't know that. I had no idea. Oh, now I understand why you did what you did. I didn't like it." And she said, "Oh yeah, I don't like it either. I totally get it." And so you might say that they created a mutual story by understanding each other's stories. So I think that, we can't throw the whole baby out with the bathwater. We have to share our stories. They're very, very important, but in the sharing, in the storytelling, we have the opportunity to transform. And that's, I feel, what the restorative method of discipline in schools is all about, is giving children the opportunity to share their stories and thereby transform. Well, we're here at 5:33. Is this, am I overtime here? Somebody help me out.
We typically go for 1 hour, so this would be the end of our session.
Okay, great. I thought so.
Do you have any other closing comments or questions? And
I just want to thank you all so very, very much for your attentiveness and your willingness, like, to listen to this one more time, and like you, Paul. And you, Robin. So nice to see you again. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Josette.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl.
thank you.
Thank you. So good to see you again, Josette.
Yeah, you too.
We should, not wait.
Yeah, we should,
so
right?
long.
There we are in Portland and Washington. What are we going to do?
Yep.
I know. All right. So I will send this a PDF to you, Cheryl, and you can send it out to everybody.
I will.
Thank you all so much. Take care.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye.